It's my privilege to introduce these three gentlemen here today. They're going to be doing our 5G security panel. The first one, Jason Boswell. Since we don't have name tags, raise your hand. Jason. All right. Perfect. Thank you for that. It's all ordered. He is the head of security, IT, and cloud for Ericsson North America. All these titles are very impressive, by the way. Drew Morin, in the middle there, the director of federal cybersecurity technology and engineering programs for T-Mobile. And finally, Chris White is the head of network algorithms, analytics, control, and security lab for Nokia Bell Labs. Very impressive title. These gentlemen have a wealth of knowledge and experience with cybersecurity and will be sharing various perspectives on security as we move towards a 5G world. So with that, I will hand it off to you three gentlemen.
Thank you very much for that introduction. Let's see if I can balance this bottle here without it tipping over on me. I started my career in telecom security almost 20 years ago, working on early crypto technologies and ways to secure voice over frame relay, which was before VoIP, which was before VoLTE, way back then. And it may sound like a long time, but Ericsson as a company still has me beat. 140 years of building, I'm waiting for my slides, there we go. 140 years of actually building secure, trusted communication networks. Regardless of if it's a decade or a century, though, all of us in the industry and in this room have learned some common truths. I've learned that whether it's 5G or 3G or 0G with tin can and string, back when we were kids, right? That still works, by the way. Ask my 5-year-old. Communications are what bind us together. And think of like a virtual string between two endpoints that can bridge socioeconomic gaps or even large distances. But I've also learned that there's always someone else on the other side of things that's working hard to manipulate or intercept or cut those strings of communication that we rely on. So how do we at Ericsson build secure networks then? How do we keep those string cutters at bay? It starts with an end-to-end trust stack. We build a base of trusted hardware and software that enables the network infrastructure layer above it. Trusted operations are then built on top of that network infrastructure, and that is what enables secure and trusted business to happen around the globe. That's part of the purpose of why we build those communication networks as well, right? Is it's really become a foundation of the global socioeconomic society. But Ericsson does not do this alone in a silo. We work together with many of the industry leaders here today, many of them here in this room, with CTIA, with our customers, with our partners, even our competitors, on working groups and standards groups, because we all have a common goal to make sure that we're doing our best to build the secure network society of tomorrow. Certainly, 5G is a primary driver of what Ericsson calls the networked society, where everything that can benefit from being connected will be. A digital transformation is happening where every company is becoming a digital company. IoT alone is predicted to be a value add of almost $2 trillion globally by 2020. Connectivity is the key enabler to make that happen. And we have to do that in a secure way. According to the most recent Ericsson Mobility Report, we could see 30 billion connected devices by 2022. And connected machines will outnumber all of us humans within just 2 years. So when we talk about securing the mobile endpoint or the connected threat landscape, that's a moniker I like to use a lot, the conversation has to change because what's connected is changing. As 5G provides new pathways for IoT and cloud-based networks, we will have new security challenges to face. So some of those security challenges are new business and trust models within 5G. we'll see third-party virtual networks running inside traditional access networks. And that can create a lack of visibility or continuity in security policies if they aren't architected and designed correctly. There will be new actors in the communication chain as cars and people, buildings and infrastructure all become interconnected as trust anchors, or in other cases operate in a trustless architecture where data moves from end to end and only gets validated at the endpoints. Interconnection trust models then must also be enhanced to avoid illegitimate requests and spam and increased abuse. There will be new service delivery models, access and voice calls and IP packet delivery. That has all largely happened governed by the same connection models in the past. But 5G will enable us to move more over-the-top services in place than ever before. So we must be sure that attackers are not exploiting those new channels. The threat landscape itself will continue to evolve. There's an increased attack surface just due to the sheer scale and number of connections. There's an increased value for attackers as network connectivity becomes not just a business enabler, but in some cases a business differentiator. And there can be increased collateral damage as well when those attacks are successful. What we think of as a connected device then also evolves. So we must consider protection from malfunctioning or malicious IoT devices, as 5G enables a new wave of hyperconnectivity in scale. And finally, critical infrastructure. As society becomes more dependent on communication systems, many of us got here today via a series of connected networks that are becoming increasingly more and more IP-connected traffic networks, for instance. So 5G itself becomes a mission-critical technology. And the very benefits that 5G will bring, like lower latency, increased reliability, and speed, also make those endpoints and connected networks more attractive targets for attackers. So certainly there are new challenges, but we are ready to face them because we are planning in advance and we are doing it together. As was mentioned this morning, we're not just waking up to find the ugly baby in the room that 5G will become. It will be a beautiful baby. The very nature of developing a security baseline, we talk a lot about this in groups like CTIA, and we work with groups like 3GPP. The very nature of that ensures that it is a multi-stakeholder process. And as we evolve to common architecture models and systems and standards, that means we can also mitigate threats and resolve vulnerabilities faster. Network slicing. I get very geeked out about this one because it is the ability by the network slicing, the ability to create multiple logical networks on top of a common shared physical infrastructure. What that means for me in security, it's a whole new world of flexibility and speed and targeted functionality for security. It enables us to isolate subnetworks so that if we think something is malicious, we can peel off that traffic and inspect it for deeper analysis. We can also limit the scope of DDoS attacks and the impact of misconfigurations. Securing devices across the IoT landscape is going to become critical for a broadly deployed 5G network. The new trust models that I mentioned before can also be beneficial as they allow hop-by-hop transport security that is authenticated by the core but doesn't have to come all the way back to the core to attach. Of course, 5G brings greater reliability and resilience and the ability to recover faster and in more predictable ways. That's very important for operators. Virtualized and distributed nodes allow us to spin up additional resources as needed without the increased costs of dedicated hardware. And as we move more services over the top, we'll be able to deliver more targeted security for consumers and businesses. And by continuing to work with our partners, our customers, other industry leaders, Ericsson is confident that 5G will help us achieve our vision of a secure network society. Thank you.
Good morning. We all came to a cybersecurity summit, and we've been hearing about physics. We had Chairman McCall talk about quantum mechanics, Jason telling us about string theory. So I'm going to try to bring it back to the networks and cybersecurity that we've been talking about earlier. And I really want to try and phrase something a little bit differently. We were talking about it, just kind of came to me with Jason talking about the network hardware. We've heard about the software and all that. I want to talk about HumanWare, okay? We're going to talk a little bit about what's happening in the 5G and where that leads us. How's this thing? Was it green?
Yeah, the green one.
Sure, take the green one. Anyway, okay, so 5G, we've heard a lot of statistics already about the growth that it's going to drive, that it's going to be, we're going to have billions of people who are going to be using these devices. We're going to have 20 billion some odd devices, all these other types of capabilities that 5G is going to bring. Tremendous growth, tremendous growth. The other thing it's going to bring is going to bring tremendous job growth. Accenture did a study that just wrapped up in 2017 here, and you can't see the green very well because it's so tiny. That's the jobs being created that are forecast to be created in the network industry, okay, for deploying and developing and running 5G. The blue is what's happening outside of our industry that's going to be driven by 5G. And this is just the US and showing a couple of different states examples. Basically a 35 to 40 times growth in jobs outside of telecom, okay? Why is this important? This is important because we have to think of cybersecurity a little bit differently. It's not just about IT, about hardware and software. It's about internal control systems, vehicle-to-vehicle systems, industrial control systems. It's a lot of different skills beyond just the basics of understanding ones and zeros and how you protect them, okay? And that's kind of a key challenge, I believe, that we've got as an industry and as a community at large. And that's why what we're doing here in the telecom industry is very important in terms of partnering with our entire ecosystem as well as with government and kind of leading the way to drive capabilities that can be shared across industries. And I'll talk about that in a minute. So it's driving jobs. So what does that mean? That means what's the HumanWare element? We're looking at basically a gap. Chairman McCall talked about that briefly. He said about the workforce development gap. He talked about the scholarship for service program, excellent program, and what the challenges are that we're dealing with here. Right now, we're in a stage where the human attack surface is the primary attack surface, okay? Basically, we're seeing stats between 75 and 90% of all of the attacks are associated with phishing attacks. Those are the typical way they get in. And granted, as we start getting over more to these IoT and these other 5G type of devices, quite frankly, if I send an email to your refrigerator and it responds, I'd be really shocked. It might happen, we don't know. But what we're seeing is that there's this human element, and so we're talking about hygiene and education of the human element. But the other aspect of the HumanWare is that we do have a gap of people who are skilled in the art, okay? We have a lot of different challenges that we have to deal with here because the gap is projected to grow, not lessen. With all the work that we're doing as an industry in partnership with our government partners, we are still going to see this gap continue to grow, okay? And why is that? Well, there's a couple of different things. One is that kind of, I'll show my age, okay, yeah. I'm over 50, well over 50. And look back in the days of yore, there was this whole gap in engineering, right? Computer scientists. Back when I graduated school, I was able to get away from the chisel and hammer and was able to actually get into a computer and punch cards and all that. What ended up happening is that because of the newness of the computer sciences programs, there was a lack of actual computer science degree programs that were consistent. So ACM got together, Associated Computer Machinery, got together with IEEE, that's a whole bunch of electrical engineers involved in that, and they defined a curriculum guideline. What is a computer scientist? And then over the years, we've seemed to start to fill in those gaps for computer scientists. Well, we're at the same stage here with cybersecurity. We don't have for the workforce curriculum guidelines that the universities can say that if you graduate with a cybersecurity today, you have this basic core of knowledge that's consistent, whether you're coming out of University of Washington, Carnegie Mellon, NYU, Maryland, it doesn't matter. It's not consistent today, and they're working towards that. Also, the skill level for cybersecurity. You can't take an entry-level person and really get them into a job that's going to impact your position in terms of cybersecurity. And think about all these entry-level, all these jobs are going to be created across multiple industries. There's a specific focus and certain skills you need to have. Quite frankly, protecting against an attack on a router is quite different than protecting against an attack on a centrifuge, okay? If I'm dealing with certain types of parameters, I need to know what the parameters I have to push to the limit are to be able to affect the change that I'm looking for. That's one of the things that you have to take people with a basic skill once you have those curriculum guidelines, and then you have to do additional education, focused education, to make them able to support your requirements in the cybersecurity domain. The other thing that's finally the challenge that's causing this gap to increase is, quite frankly, if you're a skilled cybersecurity professional with the background, the experience, the knowledge set, all the great things that we want to impart to the next generation, what are you doing? You're working in the field. You're not educating. The reality is it's too tempting, and the companies have such a need, they're really pulling people out of the academic institutions. So, how do we address this? There's a couple things that are going on right now, and I was one of the co-chairs of the FCC's working group in CISRIC, and we actually looked at Working Group 7, looked at workforce development, came up with a set of recommendations. Go to the FCC's website, Communications Security Reliability Interoperability Council 5, Working Group 7, yada, yada, yada. Anyway, if you go and look there, the report is actually published, and it has some recommendations that industry with government made. But some of the things that we're talking about here that we highlighted was there's a joint task force in cybersecurity education. It's a partnership between ACM, IEEE, GW, some of the universities, Intel, other industry players, and they're trying to define curriculum guidance. They have a draft that they're working through already that's been published, and they're kind of iterating on that. We are also seeing a lot of internships, programs, and partnerships that are being done by our industry, where we actually work to retrain our staff or to help the local universities get training specific to what our needs are in our industry. And we're setting up these model type of programs. Then this cybersecurity workforce development framework, wonderful. It gave us a lexicon so we can all speak in a similar language, similar to the cybersecurity framework. It gives us a common lexicon we can share to describe what do we mean when we say a cybersecurity analyst. Excuse me. Should have brought my bottle up here with me. Okay, and finally, communications industry, government partnership. I already mentioned the FCC Cybersecurity Working Group. So we've got curricular guidance we're working. We have common lexicon that we're working towards. We have different programs that we as an industry are working with local universities to address. So what's next? I'm going to give you a quick example of what T-Mobile specifically has done. We've worked with the University of Washington in partnership to drive a specific program that's beyond just an internship program. We're working with them in terms of entrance criteria, testing to see if these folks have the right skills, capabilities, and assessing those knowledge, skills, and abilities prior to them even getting into the program so that we know if these people can make it, okay? Because some people may want to be in cybersecurity, but they're just not cut out for it. So we're working on that, refining it. How do we then enable those skills to be really iterated? We're working with undergraduate, graduate, researchers to try and put together an entire ecosystem within this university T-Mobile partnership around cybersecurity development of these HumanWare resources. Success rate, we've placed 90% of the people in this program into full-time positions at T-Mobile. That's a tremendous success rate for any type of program that's dealing with an internship type of capability. Now, what we're also doing, though, is this is a sharing event. We are actually working with the University of Washington, and we are now reaching out to other critical infrastructure players in the Washington State area. Can't name them. I can't say who, but we are doing that, and we've actually gotten some engagements going on with the University of Washington to try and iterate this program into other areas of people who are going to have these capabilities and these staff because they're going to be part of the 5G ecosystem going forward, even though they're not in telecom. Okay? So that's what T-Mobile has been doing. So basically, summary, it's not just about protecting things. I think right now we're focused on we need to be focused on protecting people. Because that is the attack surface and educating them. However, when you start looking at the ratio going forward, there is going to be a change as it starts becoming more about the things because centrifuges and things like that, or all these different types of industrial controls, everything's going to have an IP address, so we do have to figure out how we do both. Everything that has an address, is going to be addressable, is going to be identifiable, and needs to have secure and authenticated identities. We're also partnering with academia and government to try and drive forward the right types of programs to enable this workforce development gap to be filled. And finally, we believe that the leadership that we're doing as an industry is going to benefit all the critical infrastructure providers. Now, in closing, I want to make one other comment, and this is specific, and I know I've overrun, sorry. This is specific to the current month. If people are aware, maybe they're not, but this month happens to be National Autism Awareness Month, okay? Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is, I got to read something. So, I usually walk around a stage. I'm not used to talking into a microphone, so I'm sorry. I'm a little bit of a hyper kid. That's why I got into this industry, I guess, because I wanted to sit behind a desk and stare at a screen because of my hyper. So let's talk about something here. I'm going to read these 3 different lines and see what you think. Okay. I'm going to describe a skill set. Investigative nature, inquisitive mindset, logical, maintains a deep level of interest in the role and thus stays on top of the threat landscape, methodical, and dedicated to their subject matter. What do you think I just described? Sounds like the ideal cybersecurity analyst, doesn't it? It's also, specifically, what are the characteristics of a person with autism, believe it or not. There are some variants of autism that are manageable. For example, Alan Turing repeatedly had autism. It's more of a social disorder in his case, but very much that type of a focus. There is a program in UK that actually has been very successful. We're seeing it replicated here with GW called CyberBlue. Go on, take a look at it. It's a very important, innovative program that's going to help also address this going forward because of the millions of people that could be joining our ranks of cybersecurity specialists if we only tap that resource. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Chris White. I do work at Nokia Bell Labs. As was announced earlier this morning, we have introduced a smart hairbrush. I'll give you a couple of seconds to write your own jokes as we speak here. But I also would like to thank those of you who used your phones during the break to actually make Mother's Day gifts of these brushes. So that was also very nice. But I will add, and you know, the interesting thing is how fast the world is actually changing. We all, I suspect, those who are at least my age, remember when they first saw a cell phone that had a camera on it and said, why would anybody put a camera on a cell phone? Doesn't make any sense at all. And now it is the camera that we all use. So we have to be very careful when we actually try to plot the future. Aside from the fact that my title might actually have 50 too many characters for a well-placed tweet, I do have a great job. And the great job I have is that I get to understand the network of today, but spend most of my time thinking about the network of tomorrow, right? What is going to happen? How are we going to be able to anticipate the challenges? And those are the research challenges that Bell Labs goes after, right? We try to go for the big technical challenge that disrupts the world. And you may think that the way this starts is that we really think about the technical perspective, right? Bell Labs was the birth of the transistor, the birth of Unix. But instead, where we look is here, right? The challenge for us is to allow a child to be able to interact with the world in the same way that they could actually sketch on a sidewalk, right? Making it that simple. And that really is a networking problem. And it's interesting in many different perspectives because the human need drives what we think is going to happen. But if we think about this from a cybersecurity perspective, that child that's drawing on the sidewalk probably has an iPad, probably knows how to use it at least as well as their parents, but they don't understand security perimeters. They don't understand cyber attacks. They don't understand anything that we need them to understand in order to configure the device to be inside of a security protocol and deal with it. And that means that we can't place that task on that child. That task has to be handled in the network. And really where we're going and the way we see the world evolving, all of the tasks are moving into the network. And that means the network has to be smarter, right? The network is no longer a dumb pipe that we're actually running applications on top of. The network is actually something that participates in this process and participates in a way that is really going to drive what we believe is the next revolution. Right? This is not a revolution in sort of simple data, simple information. It's a revolution in how we interact with the world. And quite frankly, I think 5 years, 10 years, 15 years from now, we'll look back at these sort of cybersecurity conferences and saying that the internet was great and realize that it was just the small starting point to actually what we actually use in the world today. And again, it's driven by those younger kids because those younger kids are going to say, well, of course my hairbrush is connected to the internet. What isn't connected to the internet? Everything is, right? That is the IoT. And it's not us driving it because there's lots of things we're not going to use. It's the next generation of millennials and younger that are going to have that expectation. And what I've shown here, and I don't have a lot of time to go into all the details, but there are several different dimensions of what the network has to do to enable this digital reality. From hyperconnectivity of 5G to low latency for AR, VR, to cognitive understanding for the optimal utilization of resources, to the sort of new trust frameworks and new ways of securing devices and information. So I knew I wouldn't have time, so I put this slide in. Luckily, we run into this all the time. Bell Labs has written a book. This book is not meant to give the answers, it's meant to ask the questions, right? So we have chapters on all these different things that sort of say, this is where we think things are going. Because Bell Labs isn't going to define that. Nokia is not going to define it. Ericsson's not going to define it. T-Mobile's not going to define it. Together, taking what the children want, what the millennials want, what we all want from the world, defines what the network is going to be. And we have to have those conversations, and we have to have it as a group. Because in order to actually achieve that new network at scale, we need to actually have scalable understanding and connectivity. So let me jump quickly through the areas that I think are critical around cybersecurity. The first one is around securing the network. As I said, the network is the core here because it makes the connections. And more as we get to IoT and more sophisticated applications, the network actually participates in the application. Right? You don't get low latency over a generic network. You need to have the network connected to that. You don't secure a network by securing the CAN. You have to secure the CAN, the string, and the other CAN. That's the only way to do it. So end-to-end networking connectivity and understanding is critical. Bill mentioned this morning software-defined networking. I can't agree more. Right? We're in a network that has limited resources. Everybody wants to stream Netflix everywhere, but we don't have the networks that can actually do that. And that means we have to make smarter networks that are dynamic, that rapidly adjust to move the capacity where the applications need it. We also can't build boxes, right? Deploying a network service can't be that I have to actually carry and physically install more and more boxes. I actually have to be able to virtualize the functions that I can and have them run on hardware in a way that allows me to dynamically change the network. Right? If you go back 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago, maybe even today for some of the carriers, if you wanted to pull up a new connectivity, right, a 10G optical link between two different sites, that could take weeks, that could take months. But the need in the future is it's got to be milliseconds, it's got to be microseconds. And an optical link, that might be hard, but the network has to be that dynamic. So that presents a tremendous challenge from a security perspective because we're securing something that we don't even know what it is. We're dynamically adapting it. But on the other side, it also gives us a tremendous power that we can actually cut off the piece of the network that's being attacked. We can dynamically adapt to the challenges. And I think that's what Bill was talking about before. As we get the network to be more adaptive, more ability to change, we can actually bring the security perimeters in, and we can actually build security as a distributed property of the network rather than as a perimeter around the network. More than that, we have to deal with devices. I didn't put the hairbrush in, but the next slide that I do, I will do this. But these are the Nokia devices from the Withings company. We have watches, we have scales. These aren't cell phones, right? We still make cell phones too. But we also have these devices, and these are personal devices that carry personal information that are contextually needed to be connected to your doctor, your hospital, yourself. How do we actually secure these devices? And how do we do it in a world where the person using the device might be a 10-year-old child? They have to secure themselves, we have to build trust, we have to have models of trust that allow us to segment these devices and have them actually make their connections to the network secure rather than relying on us actually securing them by entering passwords and things along those lines. And the last piece is really about securing data. Right? The piece we talked about here is lots of IoT devices. The thing we didn't talk a lot about is the fact that we can't consume the information we're creating. We can create information at scale. We can sense the whole world. We can actually transmit that at scale, right? We're very, very good at that. We can store it at scale. But a human being can't look at a terabyte of information and turn that into something that's very relevant. So one of the things we're working in Bell Labs is how do we build augmented intelligence systems, assisted thinking tools that allow us to take all that data from our digital world and our physical world and not just advertise to ourselves, right? It's not about selling ourselves socks. It's about making our lives better. How can I think about the world faster, better, more well-informed by pulling in all this data? And that means we have to understand how that data can move around, the perimeters by which we actually can manage that data, and we have to build the systems that are augmented by machine learning, but not replaced by machine learning, that are augmented by artificial intelligence, but not replaced by an artificial intelligence, but instead assist us to think about the world in a new and innovative way. And I'm on my last slide, so this is one example that we've been sort of building of these sort of augmented intelligence, assisted thinking tools, very visual ways of actually addressing data at scale, because the scale is the important piece. If you think about how do we deal with cyber attacks, it's not about big data, right? I always argue that big data is a very interesting concept, but it's not very useful, because the more data you get doesn't make your life better. It's really about small data, right? It's the data that allows you to answer a question or make a decision. And the more data you get, it's harder and harder to find that small data. So the trick around data that we're trying to do is how can we actually take all that data and turn it into the relevant small data that allows us to make decisions. And that helps not only our own lives, but it also helps across the cybersecurity barrier where we're looking for what is the attack, what is the attack signature, how do we find that small needle in a haystack in a way that allows us to think, and then once we have that, we adapt the network in order to actually manage it. So I'm out of time, but thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.